Welcome to another episode of Rob Wright's Gen X Pop Culture. And today we're going to talk about another great 80s movie, Stand By Me. This movie was a hit in the 80s, and the reason why is because it was a really good character driven story about really the growing up of four young guys. And for me, growing up in the 80s, I saw this film when I was roughly the age of the guys in the story. And so the interesting thing, even though it was set in the late 50s, early 60s, it was still comparable to how my friends and I acted when we were that same age. And so it really hit home with us because we acted similar to some of these guys, and it was a lot of fun to watch, and it's a great story to begin with. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the production. I'm going to talk a little bit about the casting, and then the filming and the music of this movie, and then I'm going to tell you about some of my favorite scenes in this movie. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the greatness of the movie Stand By Me. So the story of this movie and getting it off the ground and onto film is something unique and interesting. First of all, Stephen King wrote the original novel entitled The Body, and it's from a collection of short stories that he had. I think it's called the Four Seasons book, and it's a book of character writings. The unique thing about Stephen King's writing, and he's a brilliant author, he's written some great horror stories, but he's also written some really good short stories. And another example of a good short story that he wrote in the same book is The Shawshank Redemption. So he's got a lot of really good writings, and I think you should definitely check those out. But for this story was The Body, and a lot of what happens in the movie and in the story happened to King and his friends when he was a kid. So he took a lot of his experiences and put it into his novel. And this is kind of the story of how that novel became a movie. So the writers of the screenplay and eventually the producers, Bruce Evans and Karen Gideon, loved the story. Bruce Evans actually gave it to Karen as a birthday present, and she read it and they loved the story and they wanted to adapt it into film. So they contacted King's agent to negotiate the film rights. And at first, King really was a little bit rough on wanting to get the film rights. He wanted 100,000, which was not a problem, but then he wanted 10% of the gross, which was a lot, especially for back then, and especially since they really couldn't get the star power because there weren't a lot of huge child actors at the time that would carry a film like this. So that was a little bit much to ask. So they got a director, Adrian Lyne, to help sell the film to the studios. And the problem that they had was they approached several studios, but nobody wanted it. A smaller studio, Embassy Pictures, was interested in the story, and Embassy Pictures got involved, and then they negotiated with King's agent, and they got him down to 50,000, and then a smaller share of the profits. And then as they started to progress the film, Evans and Gideon adapted the screenplay and wanted to produce, and they got Andrew Scheinman to help them produce the film. So they had to kind of write out the screenplay, get it into production, and get it going. Lynn, as I said, who had jumped in to help them sell the movie to the different studio homes, he was a director in his own right, and he was going to direct the film, but he couldn't really meet the time frame because he had just filmed the movie 9.5 weeks, and he needed kind of a break. And so they had to find another director. And so Scheinman was friends with Rob Reiner, and he sent the script to Rob Reiner. And Rob Reiner liked the script, but he thought it needed a little bit more focus. And so Reiner said he would come on to do it, but you got to kind of change your story. And he picked the character Gordy as a main focus for the story. The book really kind of focused a little bit more on Chris, and it has a little bit more about all four of them from Gordy's point of view. But really, Gordy was the narrator and who the story should really focus on, according to Reiner. And so Reiner made that change, and the writers agreed, and he came on to direct the film. The unfortunate thing that happened days before they were about to shoot the film, though, was Embassy Studios got bought out. And so the new studio that bought them out, Columbia, wasn't too keen on the picture. They were going to cancel the production. So Norman Lear, who you guys know, especially for All in the Family and some other things, backed the film with his own money. He put in 7.5 million into it to complete the film, which was amazing for back then. I mean, he believed in Rob Reiner, who I think Rob Reiner is a great director. He's directed some of my favorite films, including this one and another one that I'm sure you guys all know, The Princess Bride. That's another favorite of mine. But Rob Reiner did a great job on this film, and we'll talk more about that. But it was in dire straits, so they needed the extra money to be able to do that. And then the other thing that happened with it is, okay, you work so hard to get it from Stephen King, and they get it into production, and to get a studio, and then to get it rewritten with a new director, and you got everything ready to go, and all of a sudden your studio changes, and then you finally get somebody to bail you out. Well, now you need somebody to distribute it. And so what they had to do was they had to find a new distributor. So Paramount passed on it, Universal passed on it, Time Warner passed on it. All of them passed on it, and then Columbia finally stepped up and agreed to distribute after their head of production saw it. And the story that goes according to what I've read and research was the head of Columbia's production was not feeling well, and so they sent him a copy of the movie to watch at his home, and he watched it with his young girls, and the girls loved the movie, and so that's how he kind of gauged the reaction to it as a reason to go ahead and put it in full production and have the movie come out. So it's just a lot of steps in getting this movie out to the public, which is really cool. So the one last thing is the original title was The Body, and Columbia didn't like the name. They thought it sounded like either a horror film or a skin flick or a bodybuilding movie, and so they had to change the name. Reiner came up with the idea for Stand By Me, and it was the least objectionable, so they went with Stand By Me. So interesting steps that they took to do that. Usually films get greenlit and you have a good progression where you're not having to scramble every time, and this movie really had to scramble to get made, and I'm so glad they did it because it's such a wonderful movie. Let's talk about the casting, because I thought it was really well cast, and really the cast and the characters helped to carry the movie. So Rob Reiner, when looking for the cast and these four boys that were going to star in this film, actors at such a young age, you're talking about 11, 12, 13-year-old kids, really hadn't developed kind of the acting techniques that a late teen, early adult, or even adult actors have at the time. So what he had to do is he had to really find kids that really embodied kind of the personalities of these characters. And I thought he did a brilliant job casting. So he found Will Wheaton, who Will Wheaton was kind of, he even describes himself as kind of the geeky kid, kind of the shy, awkward kid that really fit Gordy to a T. And I thought Will Wheaton was brilliant in this movie. I think it's one of Will's best movies. I thought he did better in this movie than he did on Star Trek The Next Generation, if you can believe it. But Will Wheaton was fantastic in this movie, and it's one of his best movies. I think his performance is excellent. The next actor that they got was River Phoenix, and River Phoenix was just a tad bit older than the other three boys. He was 14 and had a little bit more experience, but he was kind of the happy-go-lucky guy and the guy that could kind of be the leader of the group, and he really embodied Chris, which is really great. I miss River Phoenix a whole lot. I wish that he had gotten the help that he needed before he passed away. He passed away way too young, and we'll talk more about that later, but River Phoenix was a great choice. Corey Feldman really embodied Teddy. Gosh, you should read about Corey's life. I feel for that guy, and I'm so glad that he made it through all his trials and tribulations as a kid, because he went through some stuff that I can't even imagine about, and I'm so glad that he's doing well and he's okay now after all he's been through. Read up on Corey Feldman because it's unique. But Corey had some real issues with his folks and real issues in real life that embodied the character of Teddy. And then you had Jerry O'Connell, who came on as Vern, and Jerry was new to acting, and he was kind of the silly, funny, happy-go-lucky guy in the in the film. And Will Wheaton said that Jerry was one of the funniest people he'd ever seen or met in his life. And it's just awesome how all four of these kids came together. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into kind of the filming of it. Um, the interesting thing was their characterization. So, Gordy, his character was about getting acceptance from his father. His brother in the story had been a football star, and his father had kind of favored him, and his mom also kind of favored his older brother. And you see that in the movie. And his brother had died tragically in an accident. And Gordy's trying to deal with that because his brother actually, showed him love and showed him the attention and affection that he really didn't get as much from his folks. And after that, his folks were still in grief. He was still dealing with the grief of the loss of his brother. And so some of this movie is about how Gordy deals with that with his friends and how he grows into maturity from that and is able to kind of move on from some of those feelings. And Will Wheaton does a fantastic job capturing that. He does a brilliant job in this movie. It's really well cast for him. Corey Feldman, like I said, unique story. I mean, his parents were both in the business, but also they kind of expected him to carry his weight at such a young age. And it's just unbelievable that they would put that kind of pressure on a kid, that they would treat a kid like that. It's just awful. Go read about it. Go hear what Corey has to say about it because it's really a unique story and a very sad story. And I'm so glad that he made it through that. But he embodied Teddy because Teddy went through some things in this story with his father burning his ear. And then with some other aspects of Teddy's character, a lot of anger issues with Teddy, Corey actually felt to his parents. So Reiner even said in watching some of the documentaries on this that Corey Feldman was a natural for this, and he was great in this role. He's fantastic in it. Basically, during the filming, Corey Feldman's parents kind of dumped him on the set and kind of, hey, we're not going to be around. You're all on your own. And he had a hard time with his folks doing that. And then he kind of describes it as, the set was the best thing to get away from his folks, got him some relief during those times of filming the movie. And he and River Phoenix had some interesting adventures growing up on the set, and they talked a little bit about that. Corey Feldman talks a lot about it in one of the DVD commentaries, which, of course, I always say that you should look at this and try and get it on physical media because you don't know how long it's going to be on streaming or on cable or anything like that. And the physical media also has some really good insights in the filming with their special features. And this one's the 25th anniversary, and they have Rob Reiner, Will Wheaton, and Corey Feldman go through the movie and talk about it. And it's fantastic. They gave a lot of great insights. Jerry O'Connell, basically he was cast based upon his personality that fit the role. Rob wanted them to understand their characters, and he interviewed Jerry, and Jerry kind of embodied a little bit of Vern, and Vern says some stupid things. And apparently in his interview, Jerry had left something in the room and he came back for it. And then he went to Rob Reiner. He's like, aren't you that guy from Channel 5 from Archie Bunker? Didn't you play Meathead? And that kind of cracked Reiner up. And it just embodied Vern because Vern is the kid that always says something a little bit off the wall or kind of stupid, crazy, or funny. And that's why he got cast. And Jerry says that during the course of that summer, he really became Vern and grew into the character. And that's fantastic. Now, Jerry O'Connell, he really made a name for himself and really did well. He married Rebecca Romaine, and wow, what a catch. And the interesting thing about his character, we'll talk a little bit more about this during the filming, but he actually got bit by a dog on the lip during the movie. He was teasing a dog in one of the scenes, and he got bit by a dog. And in part of the movie, you can see he's got a fat lip because he's got stitches on his lip, which I thought was kind of funny. And this was his first movie experience, so it was interesting him coming in to this film with a couple of established child actors, which was interesting. River Phoenix was, like I said, brilliant cast as Chris. They said that there was a piece about him with the shooting, and his parents were were hippies, and he kind of grew up. He was a vegan, and he kind of grew up around Hollywood, and it was interesting how natural he came across. But like I said, he had his trouble. He and and Corey did all kinds of things offset that you found out. They went to parties with local kids, and it was the first time that they had gotten into alcohol and even into smoking marijuana. And apparently, River Phoenix became a man during this shooting of this. Like they said that one day he came to the set and found out that it was his first time with a girl. So very interesting kind of stories that they told about this. But the problem that River Phoenix had is he got too far off into the drug battle and battled drugs and alcohol later into his teens. And unfortunately, Corey Feldman reached out to him and tried to get him back on the right track. Corey had finally gotten sober and gotten clean, and he was going to try and help River, and unfortunately they couldn't make their schedules work, and unfortunately, tragically, we lost River. And Corey Feldman, I'm so glad that he tried to reach out, that he made the effort, because sometimes that doesn't happen, and he really did a good job of trying to do that, but it still hurts him that he couldn't reach out to River in time to save him. And Rob Reiner talks about this on the DVDs. Like, unfortunately, sometimes when you're running into that path, there's that train that's coming, and there's no way to pull somebody off, and unfortunately, it hits them. And it's so sad that we lost River Phoenix. This is one of his best movies. He gives an absolutely phenomenal performance, and I'll talk more about that as we go on. The story of the narrator writer is really interesting. Originally, they didn't have Richard Dreyfuss in it. They were doing David Dukes, Ted Bessel, Michael McKean, all auditioned for it. And really, the writer narrator was not supposed to have any visual time in the movie. He was just supposed to narrate the whole thing as the kids did it. And it just didn't sound right to Reiner. And so he got one of his best buddies growing up was Richard Dreyfuss, and he got Richard Dreyfuss involved. And not only did they have him narrate it, which, oh my gosh, he did a brilliant job narrating this. I love Richard Dreyfuss, such a wonderful actor, and he did a great job of narrating this, but they also shot scenes with him, and they were able to do that because he was such a big name, and he did such a fantastic job. I love it. And, the funny thing in one of the commentaries is Will Wheaton says, well, as I've grown up, I'm starting to look more and more like Richard Dreyfuss, so it kind of fits. So that was fantastic. And I thought Richard Dreyfuss kind of makes the movie, especially at the beginning where you see the scene where he's in the car and he's reading about what happens to Chris in the paper. And then at the end, typing it up, it really brings the story to a good close. And I really enjoyed his performance in this movie. Another great character in this is Ace, played by Kiefer Sutherland. And Kiefer Sutherland was the bully of it. And what Rob Reiner told him to do was kind of be the catalyst. So he's the bully catalyst that gets them, pushes them to want to find the body. He's the bully catalyst that pushes them to want to stand up to him. He's really kind of the catalyst for these boys, and he's kind of the bad boy in this. This is one of Kiefer Sutherland's first roles, and it's really a breakout role for him. You said during the filming of it, he would be in character, and he kind of scared the crap out of these 4 kids. They said that they kind of were afraid of him because he would act the way he was supposed to be in the movie. The interesting thing that people often talk about is the hat scene, and it's a scene where Chris and Gordy are walking along. They just shot the gun, and they run into Ace and Eyeball, and Ace and Eyeball kind of pick on them and steal Gordy's Yankee cap, which was given to him by his brother. And the Yankee cap meant a lot to Gordy because his brother had given that to him. It was something special, and Ace and Eyeball just take it from him. And you kind of ask the question. Even Will Wheaton said that he said he asked this question during the filming. At the very end of the movie, why doesn't Gordy get the Yankee cap back? And Rob Reiner explained it to Will and explained it on the video that Ace is really just this bully. He takes something, but the only value that it has to him is to tease the kid in the moment. And he said that he went around the corner and probably threw the hat away afterwards because it had no value to him, only the moment of teasing the kids. So that's interesting, and it's interesting the character aspects of bullies and getting picked on and different things. That's fascinating with the character. And so, like I said, Reiner gave Kiefer the direction to be mean enough to make them want to find the body and make them want to stand up to you. So those were kind of keys to his character, and he pulls it off brilliantly. Kiefer Sutherland is a brilliant actor, and you can really see if you watch some of his earlier films how he really developed and grew as an actor into his amazing talent now. One of the cool things about the actors and what they did is Reiner really put them through a camp to really get to know each other, and they talk a little bit about this in the beginning of the movie where they're talking through what happened and how they filmed. So he got the boys together a couple of weeks before they started filming, and he had them do kind of theater technique games so they could get to know each other. And the boys really embraced this, got into the games, got to know each other, and it shows on screen how good of friends they became. It really shows how close they were. A lot of that is not just acting; it's they were real good friends. And there are a couple of scenes here that we'll talk about later to where you can really see it, and you can really see the embodiment of this cast and these characters. That's why it was so brilliantly cast. A couple of interesting casting notes here is that you had River Phoenix was originally reading for the part of Gordy, which was interesting. I think he could have pulled it off, but I think he's a much better Chris. Another actor that was auditioning for the part was Ethan Hawke, and Ethan Hawke read for Chris, which I thought that was interesting because Ethan Hawke's a great actor. I like his performances in several movies, but I don't know if I could see him as Chris. River Phoenix just knocked it out of the park as Chris, and I'm glad they made the decisions they did on this movie. So that's a little bit about the cast. Let's talk a little bit about the filming, and of course, got to talk about the music, especially the theme song, Stand By Me. So the filming of this movie is very interesting. Rob Reiner talks a lot about the details. They filmed a lot of it around Brownsville, Oregon, which is a small town in Oregon outside of Eugene. And they chose this city because it still had the old-time 50s look and the 50s feel of the late 50s, which is what time period the movie's set in. They did primarily filming in Oregon and Northern California. And one of the unique stories that Reiner talks about is they had pretty much sunny days throughout filming. It never really rained. It was a perfect summer in Oregon. So they filmed it in the late summer, and it was perfect. And usually on movie shoots, you don't get that every day where you have these perfect sunny days. You have a few rainy days, a few other things, and you have to stop shooting because you have to have consistency throughout your film. And they really lucked out with the filming of this with that. The other thing that they did was they did get several local residents involved. There were over 100 local residents that were employed as extras, and you can see them in the film. And they really did a good job of really gathering it together, particularly in the story sequence where you have the lard ass story, and there are a lot of extras in that, and that was really cool. Reiner is really proud of just how they shot this film, and there's one shot that he really talked about in the DVD commentary that he's most proud of. So there's a scene, the chopper sick balls, and you have Gordy climbing the fence, and then you have the owner of the junkyard kind of saying that he's going to contact all the fathers, and then kind of really says that Teddy's father's a lunatic, and it really kind of upsets Teddy, and they walk off, and their walk off is just one continuous shot that lasts for a few minutes in the movie, and you see where Teddy kind of breaks down. And one of the unique things about this film is it shows the friendship among these boys and how each one of them is able to have some vulnerability among their friends. And that's kind of why this movie kind of resonated with me, because true friends, people that you are tight with, you can be vulnerable around and you can break down around, and they're there for you. They're there to pick you up. And that really resonated in this film. And in this scene that Reiner talks about, he's very proud of because it's all one shot and it's all one big take. And, Corey Feldman is pouring his heart out as Teddy, and he does such a fantastic job. And the other boys are there trying to support him and trying to cheer him up. And Corey Feldman talks about the scene where he had trouble kind of getting himself to cry in that scene, so he's got his head down. But he does a brilliant job. I thought he pulled it off really well, and it's just one continuous shot that you don't necessarily. Only a director would really point that out sometimes, but I thought it was a great scene and a great shot where you kind of get to feel Teddy's character and how he really does love his dad, even though his dad has abused him, and he's really proud of his dad for his military service. And so it really delves deep into Teddy's character in that one moment and in that one shot. And Reiner really says that it's one of his favorites of the movie. The interesting thing is that the film was actually rated R, but to be honest, the reason why it got an R rating is because of the language in the film. And they talk about it as being probably the tamest R-rated movie out there. A couple of shots that were interesting. You have the famous shot on the bridge. It's the part where they decide to cross the bridge, even though they don't know when the train's coming. And, evidently you have Teddy and Chris that are a little bit ahead, and Vern's kind of crawling on the bridge, and Gordy's kind of following him, making sure he's okay. He loses the comb, which is kind of a funny scene on the bridge, and then all of a sudden, Gordy kind of hears something, looks at the rail, and train! So the cool thing about this shot is that, first off, there was kind of underneath there was wooden stakes, so they're not really on a bridge having to make sure their footing doesn't slip, so they would fall into that. Now, a real train track, don't ever do this. It's very dangerous. Always go around. Never anticipate that thing, because those things are dangerous. So don't ever do that. But in the filming, it wasn't as dangerous as they made it out to be. The other aspect that Rob Reiner talked about is they used a 600 millimeter lenses on the camera to make it look like the train was closer than it was. The boys were never in any danger at all. And one of the hard things that Reiner had getting the actors to do was for them to pick up their intensity and their fear at the moment of it, because the train wasn't really there. So when they had to run, they weren't getting it. So they shot it over and over in many takes. And there's these guys that are pushing a dolly so they can really film them and capture the scene and move with the kids and get the shot. They kept going back and forth. And Reiner got upset with the guys and said, look, he yelled at them and it was like, if you're not afraid of the train, you're not afraid of those guys who've been working, you better be afraid of me, because I'm going to kill you if you guys don't get the scene. And he really laid into him. And Will Wheaton says that it really scared him, and Jerry even talks about it. They scared them both. So it scared them enough to where they got the take perfectly. They're crying. There's the intensity. There's everything that they wanted in that. And they were able to get the take. And after that, they were kind of around her, oh, we're so sorry. Did we get it? We get it. And he was like, yeah, you guys got it. Good job. And it was a pivotal scene in the movie. So great job with that. Another scene that everybody's so familiar with in this movie is the tale of the fat kid Lardass who has a pie eating contest. And it's kind of a gross scene, but it's hilarious and a lot of fun. It's something that me as a kid, we would tell throw-up stories. We would tell a story like that back when I was that age and the age of these kids. So it was hilarious. But what they did was they used pie filling, blueberry pie filling, and they mix it with a cottage cheese mix for the throw-up scenes. And they use particular sound effects, especially when he's standing up and you hear him and you hear his stomach and everything kind of go together. I mean, it fits. And they had kind of hoses that were right by their mouths to throw up. You can kind of catch it in the scene, but it still comes across as if they're puking. And that scene was very interesting, how they shot that and how they did that. Another famous scene besides that was there's a scene where Gordy really has his moment where he's upset and he cries after, having this nightmare about his parents not loving him and not wanting his brother to die, saying that he wished it was you. And Reiner kind of wrote that scene. It really kind of got to him, and it was really a sweet scene where Chris kind of tells Gordy that, hey, it's okay. You're a great writer. You may write about us someday. You're okay. Don't pay attention to that. You're good. And it really sums up what the movie's about. Another scene that is great is that Reiner helped write this scene out because in the book it's Chris that gets the gun at the very end with Ace, and he changes it to Gordy. And Reiner really wrote this scene out, and he basically told Will Wheaton that, hey, look, don't worry about the gun. The gun is its own catalyst. It's not about shouting at Kiefer Sutherland or anything like that. It's about a conversation because the gun's already there. It's already the threat. And that scene is really great. I'll talk a little bit more about it, but Rob Reiner really wrote that scene and really got it out. And it's one of the best scenes in the movie. And it really kind of shows the maturity of Gordy and how he goes from this kind of kid that was still dealing with his hurt, but after finding the body and going through this, really kind of matures and steps up in an interesting way. Now, like I said, the other interesting thing about this is you have that scene, you have the ending, and in the book, all three of Gordy's characters pass away, as Stephen King wrote. And Rob Reiner didn't feel that was as realistic, and so he only has the one character, Chris, pass away, and then he tells the story of how the other two ended up, and it's a really great scene how that happened. So I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the music. So an interesting story that came out in watching the commentary on this movie was that the studio was trying to get Michael Jackson, who was good friends with Corey Feldman at the time of filming, to redo Stand By Me and give it a Michael Jackson version of Stand By Me. Rob Reiner kind of nixed that idea because he loved the original and thought the original felt in the time frame of the movie, and he wanted to keep the music in that time frame. So he got a lot of the songs from the 50s and early 60s to be in the movie. Benny King was so happy with that because it really resurrected his song, and his song became another top 10 hit in the 80s. And I loved this song growing up. We'd hear it on the radio all the time, and the video is great. I love the video. The video is really good, and the song itself is great. But you had a lot of really good songs in there. You had some Buddy Holly, Every Day, Let the Good Times Roll, Come and Go With Me, which is a standard for the 50s. Get a Job was in there. Of course, you have the scene where they sing Lollipop and they do the thing out of their mouth, which is great. Yakety Yak, and part of the scene with the mailbox baseball. And then, Great Balls of Fire, which is standard. And, of course, the hit Stand By Me, which came out back then and was re-released. So, great soundtrack. Definitely a good get if you still collect CDs or collect music or even download. So, great songs, great soundtrack, and it really fit the film and it fit the time frame, because a lot of the times you're seeing these boys, they're going out and they're going to find a body, and it's a couple of day journey, and they've got a radio with them and they're listening to these songs on the radio. So it really fit the tone and the pace of the movie. That's why the music is so important. And the other thing is that the composer of the movie really implemented some of these songs and some of the music into the background of this story. So there are scenes where the composer takes the instrumental version of Stand By Me and you hear it played during the movie, and it really captures a lot of the scenes. Another couple of miscellaneous things that I found out about this movie that are interesting is that apparently this movie is huge in Japan, and they not only have the movie out in Japan, but they also have a stage play that they perform in Japan of this movie, which is fantastic. It's interesting. The other thing is that Stephen King, as I mentioned, was the author of this. Stephen King loved this movie. He loved all the changes that they made. He loved how they really brought out the characters. And he has said that this is the best adaptation of any of his work, which I thought was unique and remarkable because, wow, you've got so many different great movies that have come from Stephen King's works. And for him to say that this one's the best one is really awesome. The other thing is that this movie was very personal to Rob Reiner. Rob Reiner, his father Carl was very famous, and he had some pressure on him as a kid, and he really identified with the Gordy character um, with that. And so Reiner said that his friends helped him through those parts of his life, and so he identified with these kids. And Reiner said that this is his favorite movie of all the movies that he made, and I thought that was really interesting to hear. And especially with movies like Princess Bride and a few others that he's done, that this one is his most outstanding movie and his favorite. So, just very interesting way that they did this, the filming, the music, and everything that went into this movie. Let's talk about some of my favorite scenes in the movie, and we'll get into that next. So let's talk about some of my favorite scenes of this movie. Don't forget to share some of your favorite scenes and favorite memories of the movie in the chat, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's go through this. They're not in any particular order, but I'll kind of tell you. I love the clubhouse scene at the beginning. It reminded him of me hanging out with my friends and kind of the stupid things that we would say to each other. Of course, you have Vern trying to get in with a secret knock, and he can't remember the secret knock, and they finally let him in. And that's something similar that my friends and I would do at the time. A lot of fun, very funny, hilarious. And then, obviously, growing up, having a treehouse or a fort. We had a fort in our backyard growing up. It was always fun to play in. And just some of those things where the kids are being kids just reminded me of my youth. And at the time, it was like, wow, that's every day. That's how we act. So it was really great. That's why I love that scene, and I still love that scene today. My next favorite scene goes all the way to the end, and I love how they explain what happens to each character. Vern finds a penny, which is unique to his character. If you're familiar with what happens to his character, he had lost his pennies, and he finds a penny at the end, and it says that he went on to marry his high school sweetheart and work construction, and he lived a good life, and that was great. And then it explains what happens to Teddy. Teddy tried to get into the army, but his glasses in his ear prevented him from doing that. And he got in trouble with the law, but finally got out and got himself straight, and he worked odd jobs around Castle Rock, which is cool. And then it talks about Chris. And Chris, his character made a significant change. His character decided to enroll in the harder classes with Gordy and really make something of himself, which is a unique part about this film. It's Gordy and Chris's characters that make the significant changes. And because of his friendship with Gordy, he's able to make those changes and become a lawyer. And you find out the sad part about him, that he became a lawyer and was successful, and he tries to break up a fight between two guys. They don't show this in the movie, but you hear it being referenced, and he was stabbed in the throat and died instantly. And it's very bittersweet when you watch this movie, especially now, when they tell the story in the movie and you see he says goodbye to Gordy, and Gordy says, "I'll see you." And Chris says, "Not if I see you first," which indicates the direction that he's going to go. And then he walks away and he kind of disappears out of the frame. And it's kind of hard to watch now because we lost River Phoenix, and it's kind of him disappearing from the movie. But it's a really good scene. I love that they have it in there. It really touches the heartstrings. And then the actors and director really talked about that quite a bit. The next scene is probably the most famous scene that everybody talks about, is the scene with Davey, who's called Lardass in the film. And it's this fat kid that gets made fun of, and they have a pie eating contest, and he decides to get revenge. And so he drinks a whole bottle of castor oil and eats a raw egg, which is kind of disgusting in itself. And he gets in the pie eating contest, and of course the puking, which is disgusting but hilarious scene. It's a very funny scene. Like I mentioned, all the extras are in that scene. It was really well shot. Rob Reiner says that he wasn't going to shoot that scene. He was just going to let it be a story. And I can't believe that they would even cut that scene out of the movie. That scene's probably the most well known. It's probably the most referenced in this movie. So I'm glad they kept it in. But wow, what a funny scene. What a hilarious story. It's just great. It really embodies the movie and really embodies what I was like as a kid. Those kind of stories were kind of like, oh, that's gross, but it's funny. So yeah, it's a great scene. So the next scene that I really like is I love the junkyard scene. So the first part of the junkyard, when they get there and uh, Chris and Gordy kind of race, and it's this great race, and it's a lot of fun, and it reminds me of me and my friends. And I wasn't the best athlete, but sometimes I took advantage of situations, and you see Gordy just go, and then Chris is like, "Oh, okay, you're gonna do that," and he's the better athlete. But it's awesome. And then the guys are sitting around the junkyard, and they're spitting water at each other, and they're trying to toss the quarters in the cans. And I'm like, this is something that me and my friends would have done. And then, you know, the the making fun of each other. I don't shut up. I grow up, and when I look at you, I throw up. And then making fun of one's mother, which we really didn't do as much in the '80s, but writer says in the '50s that was really big. So those shots there, and then when Gordy comes back and he's trying to find the guys, he's got all the stuff, and lo and behold, the owner of the junkyard's there, and with his dog Chopper, and Chopper's supposed to be this villainous dog that would stick parts of the human anatomy, particularly guys, and so Gordy's running for his life, and it turns out that Chopper's not this big villainous dog that they thought he was. He's just a regular dog, and it's funny to see that and the whole scene. And then, of course, we talked about the tracking shot and the making fun of Teddy's father at the end of it. I've already talked about that, but I love that scene. It's a great scene. It's a lot of fun. Very funny scene. And then I've got a tie for my absolute favorite scenes in that. There's a scene where in their woods, and Chris kind of breaks down to Gordy, and he talks about the lunch money. And there's this whole scene where gets referenced. They don't really show it, but there's Chris had stolen lunch money, and apparently he had tried to give it back, and he tried to give it back to a teacher, and it's the first time that Chris experiences an adult letting him down. And he thought that if he gave it back to the teacher, he would say, "Hey, look, here's it back. I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. I did it wrong." He still got 3 days suspension for it. And apparently the teacher never gave it back to the original student. She used it to buy a new dress. And he's talking through that. And he's really upset and vulnerable through that. And River Phoenix's performance in that is fantastic. Just his facial expressions, how he really embodies the character, and how he really captures that moment. It really is a turning point in Chris's life, because he realized that he did wrong. He was trying to do the right thing, and then he does what he thinks is the right thing, but instead of the teacher doing the right thing, the teacher does the wrong thing. And it's interesting, that experience. And when you find out about Chris's character at the end of the movie, you see that this is part of the catalyst. Him going through that, him talking over this with Gordy, and Gordy kind of consoling him. You really understand how Chris kind of makes the change to get involved in the harder classes and become the lawyer and become something greater than who his family is and who he was at the time. Just in that moment, which is great. It really shows his character through the movie. And then the final scene that I absolutely love is Gordy's scene at the end, where they find the body, and Teddy and Chris are arguing with Ace and his gang about who gets control of it, and Ace pulls a knife, and then all of a sudden Gordy shoots the gun in the air, and you hear the gunshot, and then he's holding it at Ace, and Ace is a little bit taken aback by the gun. But he's like, "Hey, you must have your brother's good sense. Give me the gun before you shoot yourself." And he's like, "Well, what are you going to do, shoot us all?" And Gordy's like, "No, Ace, just you." And so Ace is taken a little bit back by the gun, and Gordy's just talking to him like, "No, nobody's taking him. Nobody's doing anything with the body. Get out of here, leave." And he says a funny line, which I'm not going to repeat here because it's kind of, want to keep this a little bit more PG, but it's hilarious. And just Kiefer Sutherland's reaction to it, and just the way that it culminates with the body and with the end of this movie is brilliant and awesome. And I think it really makes for a good ending, because the boys originally were going to go out thinking that they would be famous for finding this body, and it turns out that it's not so much finding the body, it's not becoming heroes. It's kind of being able to get together and get away with your friends, and being vulnerable, and kind of dealing with life, and how to deal with life, and how to deal with certain situations, and how to rely on your true friends. at the end. And that's what makes this movie so special. That's what makes this movie so great. Is just that friendship and the love you have with these characters, love and true friendship, and how they kind of grow up and coming of age. And so that really resonated with me when I was young and still resonates with me today. So like I said, what do you like about this movie? Share your comments below. Let's have a good discussion. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.